Welcome.
Hey, good to see you, Bill.
Yep, good to see you.
Yes, sir.
Carol Johnson.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yep, thanks for coming.
Joyce Treadaway.
Joyce, yep, good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So I want to introduce you to the Whitetail Institute. Come on up here, Jody. Where we get
Yes, sir.
At you. The Whitetail Institute Next Level Consulting Team. And I'm going to do some work with these guys in the future. But I thought it would be really fun to kick off that relationship by having them come to the farm and take a look at what I'm doing here. Get another set of eyes or 3 more sets of eyes on what I'm doing, some of the projects I'm working on, what maybe I'm missing out on, what we can do differently and better. And that really gives myself and the viewers of Dream Farm a little bit more exposure to what Next Level is all about, the expertise that these guys have, and how we can put that to work on this farm. So, and we didn't get your name out, I don't think. Jody.
Jody Holbrooks. I'm sorry. I'm the biologist with Next Level Consulting.
Yeah. So I guess quickly, you might as well introduce yourselves too. Joyce, what is your role?
My role is agronomist and weed scientist for Whitetail Institute.
And then Carol.
I'm also an agronomist and weed scientist with Whitetail Institute.
So I think they came to the right place. We got a lot of weeds. So hopefully you brought your backpack sprayer and we can get to work.
That's right.
No, I really appreciate you guys' time and for coming up here, and I'm sure that I'll learn a ton.
Well, we are happy to be here and have been excited about it. I know we all have. So,
Dream Farm is brought to you by Whitetail Institute. Research equals results. Hunt Stand Pro Whitetail app. Hoyt Archery, Stealth Cam trail cameras, Wildlife Farming, and PH Outdoors food plot drills.
So Jody, I know you got questions about this one, and
yeah, I definitely do.
Joyce and Carol also.
Yep.
This has been my experiment now for a couple of years, putting pumpkins around the outside of my plots. And this is the sorghum that I got from your boss.
Okay.
And just to test it.
The testing, yeah, that's right.
This is one of the, I think I got 4 locations on the farm we can look at.
Okay.
But yeah, I've just started putting pumpkins around the outsides. This one had 200 in mounds of 4, so 50 mounds of pumpkins. And you can see like some of them are out in the very middle.
Yes, sir.
There's a mound out there.
Right.
They're just out in the middle of the sorghum, and I don't know how much of this is going to work and how much of it's not, but you can see there's pumpkins coming in. But I also wanted to show you your sorghum that we're doing the test on.
And it looks good.
It does look good.
It looks really good.
Yeah. Well, I just feel like sorghum is perfect for layering things.
Right. Exactly.
But you can also see the brassicas coming in. I also broadcast some brassicas in there early on too. And
definitely.
So there's anyway, there's a lot going on here.
This thing is worth pointing out too that you got an excellent, superb stand of sorghum here.
Mm-hmm.
And you've had a wet summer from what you have said.
Yeah.
And you haven't had to do anything on weed control.
No. I think our viewers appreciate learning more about, especially the sorghum, how to control weeds, because it's probably way more challenging than anything else we deal with.
Well, but here's the thing. You had a great crop stand, good seed emergence, good seed distribution, well-grown crop. You've been able to stay ahead of the weeds just for that in itself.
And I think that seems like the key for most of us doing food plots is to get that head start, to somehow clean the slate just as soon as you plant the sorghum and let the sorghum get maybe hopefully a couple of weeks head start on the weeds. They start to fill in and maybe you just don't get that pressure.
Herbicides are not the single, total, complete solution to a weed control problem in a food plot, or anywhere for that matter. There's some other basic practices that supplement the benefits that herbicides provide. And that's what you're doing right here.
Yeah. Carol, would you say too, with adding to that, with obviously using that clean slate, starting out with a sorghum, and then obviously you've added other things into it, that you're adding food plus you're fighting weeds too.
Yeah. So with the other stuff we're putting in.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So that works great.
Yeah, and I've often thought that beans in conjunction with sorghum on 30-inch rows would be a really good 1-2 punch.
Right.
I think I broadcast it like on a frost seeding standpoint, like
And then that goes back to-
March. And I thought, let's just let it go. Let it come in.
Yeah,
Well,
and it
it didn't come in. very
didn't do
well.
like you were. I got you. Got you. Yeah, no, I was just curious.
Yeah. So this was more of a frost seeding from this past spring, this past winter, than anything else.
Okay.
But I was looking at the grasses, and then I was looking at the broadleaf weeds and the 2,4-DB, butarac,
Yeah.
and clethodim. That would really greatly improve this going into the fall.
Yeah.
And there again, I'm trying to position it. And this is what I tell people: position it for that surge in September, October growth.
That's right. So this little area here is kind of typical of what I manage or have to manage around on these remote spots, these bean plots. If I'd have put this into corn, there might have been a few ears stripped, and that would have been it. But you put beans in up here in this kind of more remote area with no beans around, they just mow it. So this had beans about, yay tall, 5 inches maybe, mowed off. And I came in here with the drill and just drilled the power plant into that maybe 6 weeks ago or so, roughly. And this is the result. You can play around up here and see what you see. I've been impressed with the way that the deer have reacted to the peas. I think there's a lot of opportunity here because they didn't mow them off as aggressively as what they did the beans. Once you get out in the very middle, you'll find some spots where those beans, you can really see it's like a carpet, 6 inch tall shag carpeting.
All right, what's your experience been with sun hemp?
I mean, I've planted a couple times and the deer have eaten it.
Okay.
I don't know if they're eating it here or not. You can pick your way through. I mean, it was drilled in, but you can see how well the beans held up to the drilling.
Yeah.
This was 7-inch rows, 7.5-inch rows, and it didn't even destroy that bean seeding at all. So
Right.
again, that's why I like the ability to do 2 layers of anything, because the first time might not work. You can come back through and you can broadcast into it, or you can drill into it, and I do like those peas.
Yeah.
That's a really cool. You'll see they're starting to utilize it, but it just grows so fast compared to the beans.
I plant these at home, and they'll get that big, and the deer they're gone,
Yeah.
destroyed.
Well, that's our beans. If you look at here,
Yeah.
you'll see that's the way the beans are.
Yeah. But they love iron clay peas. They just love it. It's flat out love.
And I'm going to use them more in the future
Yeah.
because of just what I'm seeing here.
Yeah.
But the beauty of it is right here. It's like, they bit that off. But
Right.
look how fast it's coming back.
The problem, though, you're right. The problem is if they're coming out of the ground, one bite and that's a dead plant.
Well,
But they
beans
get
are-
a little bit taller, then they'll get that bud and they'll start. The axillary buds will form. That's what
Yeah.
they call those.
And that's the same with the beans.
Right.
They eat the beans too soon, you got nothing.
Right.
But this does better after it gets growing than the beans. I think it grows faster. Spots where there was no thatch, that's where you've got the really nice stand.
Yeah, and that's pretty doggone thick right there. That's
I just don't think the seed was getting down to it. Now we're like a group of people talking about how to make this farm better. So I know it's throwing a lot at you, so maybe I can break it up and say maybe piece by piece. What about the habitat that you've seen like in the timber? Like that might be a category we can look at and start breaking out from there. What did you see that jumped out at you, if anything, and any possibilities for improvements there?
I'll start off with that. I mean, I think as far as all the improvements in the timber, I mean, we saw the one site where you burned, and we know that's where we need to head with all of them if possible.
Yeah.
And we know we're in a little bit of a terrain that you got to be careful on the fire and all that. But I definitely think I love what you're doing. I think the holes, the openings, and all that. I mean, that's something that I suggest everywhere I go. And obviously this is a little different country than I'm used to. So this is not only me helping you, but you're honestly helping me too. And I think Carol and Joyce would say the same thing. But I do really like the timber stuff that you're doing. I just think, the more that you can incorporate a fire safely, that's great. But we talked about all that. And
that's always going to be my frustration is how do you, and you guys might have a better feel for this, and I'll keep learning. but how do you consistently burn at the right times, do the most good without having 5 people on your staff that are there, 4 days a week for a month?
And that's the hard part about it. It really is. I mean, I don't know that there's an answer.
Yeah.
I don't know if there is an answer to that.
And I'm going to try to figure it out. I mean, I did that first burn last year by myself, and it was a lot of work.
But I didn't mean to just cut you off, but I
think 2 people. I think with 2 people.
Yeah, I heard you had a guy that was an intern that was on the fire department.
Well, we talked about that actually. That's interesting because, I asked Amos about that, and he said that probably there's some possibility of them doing some training here too.
Exactly.
Just taking advantage of like, hey, we can get a little wildfire going, or whatever they call it, wildland fire.
Right.
And mess around
and
with
train putting it out.
Yeah.
I really think on these edges and on these hills where you've done the oak plantings and so I think it's amazing how it's turned. It's unreal. But I do think incorporating and Carol and Joyce can talk way more on this probably than I can is figure out how we can possibly get a weed wiper involved and do some things like that. Just some minor things I think would help big.
Yeah, and when he's talking about that, we got into some detail on it. We used to call them wicks, and it's just a PVC tube full of herbicide with a wick that runs, in kind of like a loop fashion.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then the herbicide doesn't drip out of it; it feeds into the wick.
Right.
When you drive over the top of stuff, it just paints it.
That's the same thing.
That's
paints it right on. And so that is definitely something that I need to look at.
And there are improvements in that basic concept.
And they've changed it to where it's not all rope. There's a lot of them where it's
like a carpet-like fiber.
Okay.
A sponge, or that
You just have multiple holes that feed it then, or how does that work?
Yeah. And I've got a note here to provide you that contact information for an outstanding.
Yeah, that'd be
weed
really
wiper.
good for that kind of application, because we've struggled with weed control whenever you're doing like a rehabitat or a reforestation. Weed control is always going to be the biggest issue that you face. You've seen 90+% of all my food plots now. Some of them are outstanding and off the charts awesome.
Right.
Some of them aren't. So what are maybe some of the key things that you saw on my plots that I could do better?
Well, to kind of set the stage here, I think back to a very talented agronomist that was a mentor for me when I was first hired in my former career before I retired. And he had a saying with farmers, and it was in the context of peanut production, that your yield potential is set. The maximum yield potential is set the minute a seed is placed in the ground. The same is true in food plot productivity. That productivity is established, the potential, the minute the seeds are placed in the soil. And you cannot make it any better from that point going forward for that particular planting, but it can get worse. But so you're establishing the high water mark. And I look at food plots that are successful anywhere. They planted under the best of conditions, the best seed bed preparation, the best equipment, the best techniques, the best seeds, the best variety selection, species selection for the area.
For the local, yeah.
And that's important for everybody.
And I think I do cut corners in some of that stuff, because you get in a hurry and you think, I can just chuck it out on top of the ground, spray Roundup over it, and we should be good.
Right.
But you don't necessarily get what you're after.
Well, it may work, but within this, I try to, when I work with clients, Jody's clients or our customers as a whole, I have the operating principle of reducing risk of a problem or reducing risk of a failure. And that's why I'm very reluctant to recommend practices that cut corners.
Let's go to some of your practical experience in the places that you've been, in the things that you've learned consulting with other clients. What percentage of them have too many deer in general?
I would say at least 75% of them, if not more.
Yeah, I'd say almost every place I've been, they have too many deer.
And with that being said, I can take this to, and this may be something we'll talk about a little bit and you can stop me, but it's been so simple that I have honestly, if I've saw them long enough ago that they've already had a year of planning under their belt and they listen to what I say and they put just as simple as putting a grazing cage out there, they realize finally that it wasn't that they didn't do a good job. The deer ate everything.
Yeah.
They did never, nothing had a chance to survive. And I think that happens way more than folks realize.
In the consulting visits that I've had, and I probably had 25 that I've done in a couple of years' time, and they were within driving distance of central Iowa. I'd say almost every single place I've been has too many deer. And they always say, well, how many should I shoot? You know, and that's always the question. It's like,
Oh yeah.
I mean, how many do you have? I'll tell you how many you should shoot. Well, I don't know how many I have, you know, so it's really a tough one to give a number. So what I tell them is it's an opportunity rate thing. If you've got a lot of deer, you're going to shoot a lot of deer if you shoot all of them that you can. You know, like, so that's kind of been my philosophy is that when I'm bow hunting, I shoot every deer that comes within bow range. If I don't have very many deer, I'm not going to shoot very many.
Right.
You know, so it's just an opportunity rate thing. And if you got a couple buddies that can do the same thing, you can get ahead of it. You know, people think that you can't.
Yeah, it may take a few years
Yeah.
of really hitting it hard, but
I proved that in southern Iowa is even with a bow, you can bring your population down. Let me ask you some more questions about stuff that you guys have seen. What about like number of food plot acres, the amount of food? Like, what percentage do you think of a managed property, given variables that you can define those variables, should be man-planted food? You know, like we talked about the importance of having the habitat take care of a lot of that,
right.
but you know, people are only going to do so much there. Do you have like kind of a rule of thumb that you look at and say, well, X number of acres, you should have this many food?
Yeah, I mean, I think you go to that 3 to 5% thing, honestly, but then I think according to what's around you, obviously is going to play a big role into that too. So I come from the kind of the schooling of if there's somewhere that I can plant something and it's going to be beneficial, I'm going to plant it. I don't really think you can really put too.
Well, on this farm, I've proven you can have too much food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you've also got. I'm not used to your deer numbers.
Yeah. Plus,
you get what I'm saying?
yeah, and the productivity is high. I mean, you get
Right.
200 bushel per acre corn in your food plots.
Right.
Right.
But anyway, that's maybe it's a short-term thing. You know, make a big deal about it. But maybe, you know, even through my best efforts, I can't get ahead of population increase.
Right.
So there may be a day when this isn't too much food.
Right. That's.
But I've always said, you know, 5 to 10%.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, that's what I
3
was
to
going.
5, yeah.
I know it always started at 3 to 5, but I was always one of those that would probably bump it on, you know, with what I was saying.
Especially in a lot of these environments where we're talking about where the density is probably a little too high anyway.
It's too high, and you've got a monoculture of pine trees, or you got a monoculture of one thing, and
Yeah.
you know, and that's where you have to go in and do the TSI work. You have to do this stuff, and you have to do a lot of that to create your food plot.
Yeah.
So
No, that's right. And, you know, a quick analogy on that, and it's easy to get people to understand this, is, you know, when the deer come into your food plot to feed at night, would you rather them show up with their stomach, you know, 25% full or 50% full? You know, so the better job you do in the timber with the quality of the browse and the habitat that they're living in, they enter the food plot not as hungry. So
Right.
they're not going to eat as high a percentage or as many, you know, tonnage or whatever of
and
your
then-
food plots, and they
and-
last longer.
right,
And,
and they can be a little more selective on what they eat.
yeah. So there's a question that's a, let's say, a philosophical question. Y'all can weigh in on it, but y'all, it kind of sounds like
Maybe you've been around us too long.
I was going to order some of that sweet tea at lunch, but I couldn't quite make that final step.
One day.
Let's say you got your client that says, I want this farm to be more huntable, and you know that their deer are going to be healthier if you decentralize the food and you give the deer a stress-free environment.
Right.
Do you try to change their mind then, or you just tell them, hey, I'll help you, you know, make these deer easier to kill?
Well, that's just about impossible, honestly. I would say, I mean, I do as much as I can that makes sense that they want to do, but I am definitely going to give them 110% of what I think. You know.
A lot of the consulting visits that I make, they have a little bit of a skewed concept of maybe what I'm supposed to be there for. Like I'm supposed to be there to help them kill 180-inch deer,
Right.
or whatever it is. But what I'm thinking is, I'm here to help you have more 6-year-old or 5-year-old bucks on your farm. You know, because if you've got them, eventually you'll figure out a way to kill them.
I think that's where a side of what we do don't get seen, that we kind of have to prop them up sometimes, you know, prop up and kind of keep pushing and helping.
And help them find solutions. Because we were talking at lunch, one of the things that I do now when I go on the visits is I take a chainsaw with me in all my safety gear. Because I realize that when I leave, I'm going to say, hey, you need to do some TSI in this area or whatever.
Right.
They're going to nod their head and they're going to go, okay, you know, but they don't really know what that means,
Right.
or how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just bring the chainsaw and say, let me demonstrate to you in this little small area what I'm talking about. And these are the safety practices, which I've learned, you know, some of them the hard way, but hopefully most of them by being smart. But anyway, the point is, I can leave there giving them that little bit of know-how
Right.
to take it one step further on their own.
Mm.
But a lot of the people that we work with, they don't have that experience of actually doing this stuff.
Right.
And some of them don't even know how to plant a food plot.
Right.
They just know that they should.
And then when you throw all this at them at one time, they're like
That overlap.
overwhelmed big
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So what is the answer to that? What's the solution to that? Do you have to give them like a multi-year plan and say, okay, you know,
I think
bite-sized?
Yeah, I think you I think you handle the low hanging fruit early. Honestly, you give them. My thoughts is, you know, if I'm going to somebody's property, they're just getting started, they don't have anything, nothing's going on. They're like, Jody, we got to have you. We want to start killing deer. I'm going to find low hanging fruit, which is going to be, I'm going to find an opening, whether it's the perfect one or not. You know, because that's my first visit there. I'm going to find somewhere to plant a food plot.
Right.
But then, of course, obviously, we're going to soil test, do all that on all the food plots that we decide to pick out on this property. But I think that low-hanging fruit thing is the best place to start.
You're giving them a success on which to build.
Right. The
Future
confidence.
successes.
That will make them confident enough to know, you know what, I can do this.
And learn from experiences along the way.
Right.
You know, and that's part we've all had to grow with
Yeah.
this various aspects.
Definitely. You know, I'll be straight up honest with you, it can be a headache, but my phone is always on, and I tell all my guys that. And, you know, sometimes I can't get to it. I'm way behind right now on phone calls, but I'm going to call. I'll call them all, and they've all got questions, and I know they're like, call me. It's time to plant. You know, it's getting close. I got to get my seed. But that's something that we do, and that's how Whitetail was established. We were probably consulting before anybody was consulting, but it was over the phone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. 'Cause you
So,
had to educate.
yeah, we've been
consumer.
educating for the whole.
There was no category.
Exactly.
Anything else that you see routinely when you visit with your clients that's almost across the board? It's sort of like you go in there knowing that this is probably going to be one of the things that comes up because it comes up everywhere.
Well, one thing I thought of was the grass weed control.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that not only, you know, just in consulting, but in everything is that grass weed control is an issue. And so, and Carol and I have talked about that, you know, just on some of them, we talked about it with you, some of these areas that could use some just spraying once over, some a couple, but, you know, they rob of nutrients. Grasses are just such robbers of nutrients and water and everything else that they just are such competitors.
Well, that's what's cool about you guys too, is the soil science and the weed science with you, you know, Carol and Joyce. And there's a lot of really powerful knowledge and resources available. And what I do generally, I won't say it's top level, but it's more like hunting focused. And I think more what you guys do is a little bit more science focused, is like maybe the areas where I don't get into are the areas where you guys are stronger.
And that makes total sense, because I mean, I looked in your shed over there and you had 8 gazillion tree stands in there.
Yeah.
You're obviously, I mean, you're focused on hunting. But that's what you know. That's what you're good at. And I'm not saying you don't know all this other stuff either.
I don't know what you guys know.
But you know a lot more. You a lot better hunter than I am. I can promise you that.
I mean, like I remember talking with Don Kiske once a long time ago, and this is a great quote. I said, "You must be one of the best whitetail hunters in the country." He just kind of looked at me and he said, "You know what?
He said, I'm the best whitetail hunter in the country on my farm.
Yeah,
Because he knew how to hunt his farm.
that's right, right.
So you get good at hunting the home turf, put it that way.
True.
Jody is a trained wildlife biologist. I mean, that's what he's trained in. That's what he's worked in the past. That's how his present assignment, Whitetail Institute. I'm an agronomist and a weed scientist. Dr. Treadaway is an agronomist and a weed scientist. Neither one of us claim to be wildlife biologists. That's not what we do.
Absolutely not.
And that's one of the things that we try to stay within our lane.
Yeah.
I mean, I may have some ideas and some opinions, but there's no science, but it's just an opinion.
Yeah.
He's got the science-based experience.
Well, and
And you do too, I might add.
my strength is all the years of trying stuff that didn't work and learning and asking why and asking questions and then hunting, 16, 18 different states and owning land all over the place and trying to figure out how to make money selling it and buying it
Right.
and fixing it up and how to make deer grow big and 100% practical. And I've done a lot of study. I've interviewed a lot of people and you guys know that. I'm picking your brains right now. The whole day long I've been learning from you guys.
Right.
That just adds to the database of things that make me maybe a little bit better at what I do because
Exactly.
you take that part that's more passion and you start to apply some true science to it and then you can come back around to maybe some better answers. But seeing today how many weeds the deer eat.
Right.
It's just shocking. Like even on this farm where the density is low, they could eat soybeans. We're sitting next to soybeans. I bet you we went over there and looked, there'll be weeds that they ate
And
they
not-
didn't eat those soybeans.
Yep.
And
Not 30 minutes ago, we saw where a deer had eaten a giant ragweed, a substantially tall giant ragweed.
right.
Next to a soybean.
Right
Next
next
to
to a
soybeans.
soybean plot, and none of the beans have been nibbled.
And I'll say, and I've been telling them all. When did I start telling y'all that? We got an article going. I told them, I was like, that's one of deer's favorite foods. They're like, you can't say that.
But the point is, you still need food plots. We're not getting around that fact. But the better you can make the native browse, the stuff that's just there, that the deer haven't completely wiped out, the better. And the more you understand what is attractive and what do the deer eat. And, like you guys can walk in there and say, oh, look at this, look at this, look at this. And I'm like, yeah, they're weeds, whatever, but that's, I think, a great strength that you guys can bring to the table is the ability to identify various native type, forbs and just weeds
Right.
that the deer are favorable to. You have told me, Jody, that in some cases you'll save your clients more money in seed cost than what the cost of the consulting trip is
Oh, no doubt.
because of the discounts that you can offer because they're now a next level client.
Yes, sir.
And I think that's pretty important, and from my standpoint, there aren't very many people that I consult with that I can't save them or make them money using the government programs
Right.
because there's so much work that you can get done through these programs. And, I know a lot of them really well because I've used a bunch of them over the years and I kind of know the ins and outs of how to attack that.
Right.
So that's been a really good strength for me too. So a lot of times the consulting doesn't cost the client anything.
No.
They come out in the long run ahead financially, plus they get the opportunity to maybe pick our brains on some stuff.
And to go further with that, I've had numbers, probably over 10, 12 people say, I can already tell you've saved me money.
Yeah.
And that's before they even bought a bag of seed from me because they're not going to make the mistakes they were going to make.
Right. We'll kind of wrap up here. I'm sure there's going to be other stuff that I'm going to wish later that we'd talked about.
And
But, maybe there's things you guys can think of now before we wrap up. But, I think by the time we put this whole episode together and get this into a shape that our viewers can, wrap their arms around, it's going to be pretty long. So
I'd like to add a couple points if I may.
Yep.
The first is the four of us here that are part of the next level team are not cookie cutters. We all have different backgrounds. We all think we solve problems from slightly different levels of perspective and different levels of experience and knowledge. But that gives depth to the recommendations and the land use plans that are developed.
Yeah.
And Bill and Jody see things from a wider perspective than, let's say, Joyce and I do. Because we're crops people. We're weed people and we're crops people. So it's more focused in on that.
Yeah.
Right.
And y'all are seeing more of the the
Right.
habitat potential, and you're really almost have a view of a naturalist the way you're approaching this. And I mean that as the highest of
That
compliments.
very
Well,
much.
and I like, and again, that's just me. And sometimes I get into trouble when I consult with people because I want it to look a certain way. You know, I don't want it to look like man-made or you know, whatever you want to say, manipulated.
Right.
You know, I like it to look like, hey, God put it this way. I happen to be there and push the pieces around,
Right.
but this is God's creation, not mine.
Right.
Right.
And you see so many of the properties, and they've got so many little micromanagement things, and this kind of screen and that thing. And they got a
Right.
little corner here that they built where they put picket fence in there, and the deer have to walk through that. It's like, yeah, all that stuff works, but that's really not my style. You
Right.
know, I like the natural feel.
And with that, our clients are going to receive a level of service with depth to it. This is quite a project that you have on your
Yeah.
place, and you have done an awful lot.
Well, it's going to be a cool experiment in the end. And, you know, I say experiment because most people don't enter these types of things trying to figure out how can I create the very best environment for the deer and then keep the population down.
Right.
So maybe they're not as easy to kill as they would be if I let the numbers, you know, skyrocket. And it'd be fun to see what we can produce here.
Oh, yeah.
You know, if these are the most healthy possible deer in the Midwest on this farm, what will they look like, you know, when they're 5 and 6 years old?
Right.
You know, so that's kind of what the fun part is for me, because I've killed a lot of big deer, you know, and I've shot a lot of deer, and it's not, you know, now I just want to see if you get this equation perfect, you know, what can you do? So that's kind of what this place is all about. It is an experiment. It's a project that's more of an experiment than anything.
All power to you, Bill.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it plays out. But no, I appreciate the input because that just helps, you know, to move that just a little bit further down the road. Yeah, thank you. And you know, we'll continue to do a lot of good stuff together, and I'm looking forward to working with Next Level, and you know, we'll see where we can take it.
Yes, sir. I'm looking forward to it. I really am, because you're gonna probably want to lose my phone number because I'm gonna probably blow you up a lot.
No, you'll be fine. That'll be fun.
I need to add, I've got a punch list here of things I got to send to Bill. So
Oh, that's good. You're sending me stuff.
yeah,
At least it's not a list of stuff I have to do.
There you go. You already got that.
Yeah, we already got that.
Exactly right.
you never get caught up. You just run out of daylight.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we're gonna break it off right here. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you right back here again soon for the next episode of Dream Farm. And remember to always dream big.